Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. And today we're going to be concluding our discussion on the Spider-Geddon miniseries as we take a look at Spider-Geddon number 5. So, last time on Spider-Geddon. So with the line dividing the spider army slowly starting to dissolve, the spider people from both sides of the army begin working together and sharing information, even coming up with strategies to potentially find ways of combating the inheritors. With one such strategy being to return to Earth-13, the home of the former cosmic Spider-Man, and potentially map out the Enigma Force of that Earth, mostly by going to the place where he died. The intent of this is to find the Enigma Force in the main Marvel Universe, and hopefully through it gain the aid of the Captain Universe of, well, the main Marvel Universe. Although as this is going on, there's a bit of tension in the Spider Army as Spider-Norman is making his own dissatisfaction very much clear for everyone to see. Unfortunately, though, the same time that the Spider Army is doing this, sadly on the Inheritors front, well, things are kind of getting real, as unfortunately Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, managed to make her way back from the tie-ins with the Soulless Crystal in hand and arriving right smack dab in the middle of the Inheritors base. As such, the Inheritors apprehended her, put her away because her powers come from radiation, which also makes her immune to them, which they think could be a useful asset. And from there, they use the Soulless Crystal to bring their father back to life, who immediately is ready to just go back on a conquering spree. As such, when the Spider Army is made aware of this, there is a little minor skirmish between Miles and Otto, but ultimately both decide that they do need to come to a compromise. As Miles and a few other Spideys will be trying to gather new recruits to bolster their forces against the Inheritors, while Otto and the more scientifically inclined Spideys will try and work out a strategy to take them down. Unfortunately, in the midst of all this, Spider-Norman is finally fed up with everything and tries imposing his own will on the rest of the Spider Army, which in turn causes Otto to tell him to just F right off as he finally has enough of his crap and tells him to get lost, with Spider-Norman seemingly obliging as he opens a portal and goes through, taking Spider's Man with him. Unfortunately, it turns out this was actually just a ploy. It turns out this was merely just a ploy, as Norman decides to enact his own plan to save the multiverse, which in this case is sequestering off Earth 616 from the rest of the multiverse so the Inheritors can ravage that while the other realities out there are left intact. And as a result, yeah, that's exactly what happens. He ends up blowing up the web of life and destiny, and while under other circumstances, that should result in the destruction of all reality, sorry, I'm never gonna drop that, instead it means that multiversal travel is no longer possible via the usual means, and as a result, everyone is now trapped on Earth 616, including the Inheritors. As such, with the Spider Army kind of now neutered, they begin trying to figure out what to do next, and it turns out that Otto has come up with a plan to do that, as he and Ben Reilly have made their way to the New U facility, found the Inheritors' cloning tech, and decide that they need to enact a plan to finally taken down. And unfortunately, Otto's side of that plan seems to be knocking out Ben and handing him over to the Inheritors under the pretense that if they absorb Ben's life force, then they'll leave the rest of the Marvel Universe alone. As such, in the meantime, back with the Spider Army, it turns out that utilizing what they've gotten from mapping out the Enigma Force, they managed to call it right to their base, and, well, it's not exactly happy. And that's where today's issue begins, as the Enigma Force is, well, chewing out the Spider Army, and pretty much just telling them, what makes you think that you have any right to summon me? I'm the Enigma Force. I choose who wields my power. I choose who's worthy. And can any of you say that under any pretense that you are worthy? Have you not all made mistakes in the past? And of course, since this is a ship full of Spideys, all of which are defined by tragedies and mistakes they made in the past, all of them just start beating themselves up, all about this, thinking about all the people they've let die, or people they couldn't save, and so on and so forth. Well, that works for most of the Spideys, save one, Miles, who frankly is just like, you know what? No, I'm not dealing with this shit. We're trying to save the multiverse here, and we wanted your help to do it. And you should want to help us, considering that the people we're fighting killed a version of you in another universe. So if you don't want to help us fight, then just fuck right off and we'll find some other way of taking them down. And this causes the Enigma Force to react, and basically the Spider Army believes that Miles ticked it off some more. In the meantime, back with Otto and the Inheritors, Otto kind of ends up leaving because, well, he doesn't want to bear witness to what they're about to do, since, well, like I said, they need to feast off of Ben's life force in order to gain access to his knowledge of his cloning tech, so Otto ends up going into another room. Only it turns out he's not alone. It turns out another spider person followed Ben and Otto to this place, and that person was the insomniac Spider-Man, who indeed saw everything that went down, and, well, that's not the only bit of knowledge that he's become privy to. You see, Insomniac Spider-Man began noticing something about the superior Spider-Man, and he began noting that he was starting to sound a little bit like his Otto Octavius. You know, the one who created the mechanical arms and went nuts. Well, he decided to start asking questions of the other spider people of Earth 616, specifically Miles. And then he learned the whole story about this Otto Octavius, especially the part where at some point in his life he wound up stealing the body of the original Spider-Man. Yeah, put simply, Insomniac Spider-Man is a lot more horrified to learn this, and even claims that, well, that the main universe Otto is even worse than his Otto could have ever been, and as a result, the two Spideys finally end up fighting. And while Otto is trying to calm Insomniac Spidey down, well, Insomniac Spidey isn't listening, as they keep duking it out with one another, and even Insomniac Spidey ends up webbing Otto right to a wall as he chews him out. However, in the midst of this battle, the pair of Spideys hear screaming, and it's here we cut back to the Inheritors as Ben manages to regain consciousness after Otto clocked him in the head. As such, Genix, of course, just salivating at the idea of feasting on a spider totem, and while the other Inheritors are just kind of jealous because, well, they want to eat something, ultimately, they have to let this happen because Genix is the only one that can use the knowledge in Ben's head. As such, yeah, he starts siphoning off Ben's life force. Only it turns out it was a red herring. Or more specifically, well, actually, a more appropriate term is that he was a Trojan horse. Because I have to remind you, Ben Reilly, as he is right now, is nuts. As I mentioned, when he was brought back to life after he was brought back to life recently, part of the reason why he went so crazy is because Miles Warren killed him 27 times overall. Just killing him, bringing him back, killing him, bringing him back, killing him, bringing him back, blah, blah, blah. He remembers it so much that he remembers all of those deaths, and it's what finally broke him. And as a result of being broken, it's what caused him to kind of devolve into the insane monster that was the Jackal. That he started, that in his own fear and desperation, he wound up becoming a monster. Essentially, his fear of dying again caused him to want to conquer death. But here's the thing. All those memories, they're graphic. They're real. They flash through Ben's head. And now, those very same memories are flashing through Genix's head. So yes, he now does have the knowledge to utilize the new U technology. Unfortunately, though, that knowledge is now clouded by all of Ben's thoughts, insecurities, and manias. Put simply, Genix has inherited Ben's psychotic nature. So now he's just and as such, once he's done feasting on Ben's life force, he just kind of freaks out. He's like, oh no, I'm dying again and again and again. So, yeah, at this point, he's inept. He can't use the cloning technology. Despite now knowing how it works, he can't actually do anything about it. So, yeah, this was actually a part of the plan. Otto and Ben had put this together and were okay, and Ben was essentially okay with it because, well, this was his choice, and considering that he is trying to make amends for all the crazy shit he pulled before, he believes that this is probably the best option. And part of the reason why Otto and Ben didn't tell the rest of the Spideys about this plan is because they knew the rest of the Spideys would try to stop him. Because after all, it's again sacrificing someone to save everybody. Which, once Insomniac Spidey hears this, he's actually a little shocked by this. Of course, there's still a bit of tension between him and Otto before either Spidey can air their dirty laundry. The Inheritors are made aware. The Inheritors immediately hunt them down because, well, they know that Otto's clearly done something to Ben, has clearly done something to Genix, and now they want him to fix it. And since Insomniac Spider-Man's there, they're going to turn their anger out on him too. As such, Otto does tell Insomniac Spidey to run for it, and even apologizes that he's not the man that he that he made Insomniac Spider-Man think he was. But ultimately, he at least wants to try and make amends, even at least try and be better than who he was if he can't be the person Insomniac Spidey wants. But, well, Insomniac Spidey ain't running, because at the end of the day, he's still Spider-Man. And while he can't change what a person does or anything about their past, he does know what he's going to do right now. And what he does right now is fight monsters like the Inheritors. As such, the pair of Spideys immediately jump into the fray and start fighting off the Inheritors. Unfortunately, though, it's still two spider people against a family of psychotic vampires who one of them alone, like I said, is enough of a match for them. And now they got their daddy back, so this is still very much an issue for them. Unfortunately for the inheritors, backup arrives as immediately something crashes through the walls of their base, and that something is the Spider Army, accompanied by a cosmic-powered Miles Morales. Yep. Here's what I think happened. I think part of the reason why the Enigma Force had pushed the emotional buttons it did with the Spider Army is because because it was aware of what the Spider Army was going to do, but it needed to find someone that it could choose to wield its power. So essentially it was prodding the Spideys and like, okay, so who has the balls to stand up to me? I think I'll choose them. And considering that Miles is the one who pretty much put the Enigma Force in its place, he's like, yeah, you'll do. And so yeah, Miles is now the cosmic Spider-Man. And yes, it is kind of awesome. As such, immediately the Spider Army just rushes into battle and starts helping everybody and starts helping everyone as they all join in and taking down the inheritors. With Solus going right for Miles, because after all, he was the one that killed Cosmic Spider-Man in Spider-Verse, so he immediately looks at Miles and thinks, you have the Enigma Force. I feasted on one who had that kind of power before. It was probably one of the most delicious meals I've ever had. Unfortunately, though... Sorry, Chindy came in. Unfortunately, though, Miles is not letting Solus get another chance at that, which does lead to, again, another plot hole, as Miles says. He was there when when Solus killed the Cosmic Spider-Man, so he knows, like, I can't let you get close. Except he wasn't actually there. In fact, at the time that Solus attacked and killed Cosmic Spider-Man, Miles and the Drake Bell Spider-Man were actually recruiting more Spideys for the army. So yeah, that's a minor plot hole. But either way, Miles knows don't let Solus get close. So he just starts unloading all of his cosmic power right in Solus's face to try and keep him off him. It does work a bit. Solus is still fighting through. And while it is clearly doing something to him, again, it's not enough. All it does is just slow Solus down. It's not stopping him. And on the top of that, things are starting to go from bad to worse. As on the outside, Takuya Yamashiro, aka the Japanese Spider-Man, is outside in his giant mech, which is currently in rocket mode. And as he gets ready to transform it into Leopardin, sadly, Deimos jumps outside and crashes through his windshield, intent on feasting on this other Spidey. And sadly, Deimos' activity ends up causing Takuya's Marveler ship to come crashing down. Something that Penny immediately notices as she sees that and immediately runs outside to go help him. Unfortunately, though, things are still kind of going bad as the spiders start realizing they're a bit outnumbered. And in the midst of all this, Otto realizes they need to go. Otto says that he needs to go deal with something, even pulling away Octavia to help him, as he says that at this point, missing two bodies will not make a difference. As such, they end up going into another room. They end up going into the room of the Inheritors' cloning vats, and Octavia is not exactly willing to utilize those again, because after all, it was abusing the Inheritors' cloning tech that unfortunately got them into this mess, so maybe it's not a good idea to do this. Though when they go inside, they also find the Inheritors have Jessica Drew, and Octavia immediately frees her, thankful that Jessica is alive. And so when Jessica finally gets up to speed, she realizes, oh shit, the battle's out there, I'll go deal with that, and so she runs off. But in the meantime, though, Otto goes to what he's actually here for. Specifically, he goes to Ben Reilly's body. As it turns out, he needs the cloning vats for two things. One, he wants to right a wrong. He wants to do something actually right. And in that case, he wants to revive Ben again, as he takes his body and manages to get a sample of Ben's genetic material. And yes, he does plan to bring Ben back again. Only in this time, he plans to do a hard reset of Ben. Essentially, what I think he wants to do is erase the trauma from Ben's mind, so he doesn't remember being constantly killed and revived over and over again. So he's not the crazy guy that we all know when he finally does come back for realsies. So again, that is undoing a wrong. But then there's the second purpose, because you see, Otto realizes that if the Spider Army wants to beat the Inheritors, they need to be fighting as one. After all, part of the conflict with Spider-Geddon is that both sides of the Spider Army have fundamentally disagreed on how to best deal with the Inheritors. And yes, while they're all both working towards the same goal, because of that dissension, they're not working as a cohesive unit, because not all Spideys are on the same page. After all, one side's advocating for mercy, one side's advocating for going for the kill, and while they will fight with each other, and while they will fight alongside each other to an extent, when it finally comes down to the line, they will get in each other's way. And as a result, it's gonna make defeating the Inheritors that much harder, with Otto even showcasing that despite the Inheritors being their enemies, they work better as a cohesive unit than they do right now. And as a result, Otto believes that he needs to unite the Spiders together. And to do that, they need to have common ground. As such, which is what leads him to the secondary purpose, which we'll get back to later. In the meantime, back with the Spiders. Again, things are not going well. They are very much outnumbered, and even with Miles having the Enigma Force on his side, he is not. Like I said, all it's doing is just slowing Solus down. It's not actually doing a lot of damage. So things are still going from bad to worse. Thankfully, though, that's when help arrives. For you see, in the midst of the battle, a portal opens, and from that portal comes Mayday Parker, the Spider-Woman of the MC2 universe, Anya Corazon, the Spider-Girl of the main Marvel universe, and Annie Mae Parker, aka Spiderling, the daughter of the Peter Parker and Mary Jane from the Renew Your Vows universe, which, yeah, the instant her parents see her there, they are just immediately horrified, because again, they're fighting interdimensional vampires that feast on spider people. They don't want their kid anywhere near that. However, Annie does inform them that it's okay, she's got this, and when Brix and Bora see the trio of Spider-Girls, they're immediately like, look, the entree has arrived, or whatever, and basically, that kind of goes back into the tie-ins, and in that same spirit, it turns out in those tie-ins, Annie learns something about herself. It turns out that like how Benji is the scion, how Cindy is the bride, and how Kane was briefly the other, she's actually also a special spider totem in the multiverse. Specifically, she is a spider totem called the Pattern Maker. Whatever that entails, I do not know. Basically, from what I can tell, I guess it's supposed to be like someone who can read the strands of the web of life and destiny and can manipulate them. And based on what I can tell in later stories, it's supposed to be someone who can also weave the web in whatever form they choose, which in turn also can allow them to alter specific skeins of it, which it turns out Annie is able to, because before she and the other Spider-Girls came to the main Marvel universe, they made one pit stop, specifically to Loom World, with the remains of the Web of Life and Destiny. And in those remains, they found a few skeins. And it turns out Annie can manipulate them. And the thing is, Brix and Bora, who are familiar with this trio of spiders, immediately like, oh shit, wait, she's the Pattern Maker? We gotta kill them now before... Well, they don't even get the chance to do that, as using the strands of the Web of Life and Destiny that Annie took, she's able to immediately give herself, Mayday, and Anya a power-up, as the three of them are now donned in their super mystical kick-ass spider armor, which immediately allows them to turn the tide somewhat against Brix and Bora, as they just start kicking their asses, with Annie's parents immediately coming in to join them. On top of that, Mayday immediately sees Deimos as he's duking it out with Penny, who went to Takuya's aid. And Mayday, still kind of having a grudge against this guy for killing her daddy, immediately goes in and starts kicking his ass too. So, that's fun. But again, there's still a problem here. But again, despite the addition of these three new powered-up Spideys, they're still not exactly doing so well for themselves. After all, that's only 3 Spideys, and despite the power-up that these 3 have, that doesn't mean that's still not enough to turn the tide of battle, especially with fucking Solus on their side, especially with fucking Solus there, who's still just zeroing in right on Miles. So things are not going well. But that's when another portal opens up. And guess who finally comes back to join the main story after going off in a tie-in country? That's right, Spider-Gwen is back! And she's brought with her a crap ton of spider people with her. All these different Spideys from different parts of the multiverse, including the team of Spideys that joined Jessica in the other Spider-Geddon tie-ins, which Jessica is just happy to see them. So yeah, things are going great. And guess what? One of the Spideys she brought with her It's Peter Parker, the main universe Spider-Man, who admittedly kind of looks like he looks like he's seen better days. Let me see if I can find a good picture of him in this one, but yeah, he's not looking so. But yeah, basically, remember how I said the last time we saw him, he was duking it out with Moreland? Yeah, this is what's left of him. Essentially, his costume is torn up, his mask is ripped up, and his arm is in a web cast, and he's just got pouches on him to hold weapons. So he's still clearly reeling from his battle with Moreland, but he's still ready to charge in and kick ass. He's still ready to charge in and kick ass, and this influx of spider people actually does give Miles a bit of a confidence boost, especially since one of those spider people is Gwen, who he and the rest of the Web Warriors had thought were dead, with Hobie even jumping in and just embracing Gwen in a hug. It's actually really nice. It's also here where we get Gwen, where Miles is like, oh my god, Gwen, is it really you? Or is this like an other dimensional version of you, or a ghost? And Gwen's like, no, it's me, but that sounds good. Ghost Spider, which... I'll get to my thoughts on that when we get to her tie-ins to Spider-Geddon, but let me just say that is stupid. But my own seething hatred of that and all will have to wait, because Solus immediately takes this brief distraction to get close to Miles, intent on delivering a final blow, but Miles again just thinks that this is what he needs, as he just immediately does another onslaught of energy right in Solus's face, and basically he gets a hit of inspiration, because after all, you have to remember, Miles does have a few extra powers that other spider people don't, including his Venom Blast, which he immediately mixes with his cosmic enigma force. Not only blasting Solus back, but paralyzing him. It's actually really cool. It even impresses Peter, who immediately just kind of compliments Miles. And while at first Miles doesn't recognize him as his Peter Parker, when Peter does clarify, no, Miles, it's me, your world Spidey, your other Spider, whatever. Which does make Miles happy to see him. Though ultimately Miles tells Peter that they kind of don't need him here right now. They've got it all covered. So he tells Peter to go and find Otto. He might need his help, which does make Peter go, you just want the beginning of one event and you're suddenly out of the loop, but whatever. As such, Peter runs off to try and find Otto, and sure enough, he does find Otto, Octavia, and, well, Ben Reilly, now fully revived, and like I said, now having the reset button hit, which might feed into what happens to him later in other books, but we're not going to get into those books. That's for someone else to talk about, and me if I ever get bored about this and feel like talking about shit. But we're not. But like I said, we're not talking about that. Either way, Ben is back, and when Peter sees Otto with the cloning vats, Otto just pretty much tells Peter, yes, you're not needed here, Parker. You can go. But, well, actually, maybe not. Because, yeah, Otto thinks that maybe... Because going back to Otto's whole they need to unite all the spider people together thing, he believes that he needs... He believes that he needs Peter's help. Because, well, like Otto says, he still is advocating for killing the Inheritors, which Peter is, of course, not okay with. Because, after all, he's the OG Spider-Man. He's the one that wants to help people. And he's the one that even chewed Otto out during Spider-Verse for killing someone. But Otto actually has a compromise. He does believe that there is a way to essentially do away with the Inheritors while also giving them a second chance, as he directs Peter to the cloning vax, and while we don't see what's inside, it's something that does impress Peter. It's not something he's completely okay with, but he's willing to give it a shot. And basically, what Otto wants Peter to do as part of this plan is, well, since Peter was the MVP of the original Spider-Verse storyline and one that many other Spideys rely on, he wants Peter to essentially advocate for this. And Peter, he obliges, as Otto immediately gives him the communicator to speak to speak to the Spider Army, and basically Peter tells everybody, look, this is me, Peter Parker, the 616 Spider-Man. Well, the next voice you're going to hear is Otto Octavius, and he has a plan, and basically, you gotta follow his lead. So, we don't hear what that plan is, but basically, it's enough to get the Spider Army on the same page. And we then cut back to Miles. He's duking it out with Solus, and basically, he ends up getting told to pull back against Solus, which Miles is at first not okay with, but Annie vouches that this is the best course of action, because as the pattern maker, and apparently she can see the patterns and so forth, which, when Solus sees her, she's like, oh, a pattern maker, it's been so long since I've seen one of you, and it's implied that he's getting ready to go in for the kill for her until Miles comes back, because you see the reason why Miles was told to fall back? It turns out his instructions were specifically to take down Solus, since Since the powers of Captain Universe weren't enough to kill him, one thing certainly was. Leopardin's Sword Vigor, which Miles is holding in giant cosmic hands. And I'm not going to lie, it's fucking awesome. And he even delivers the killing blow right to Solus in the same way Takuya does in his show. Just holds the thing in place and just chucks it right at him, just destroying Solus, which doesn't sit completely right with Miles, and even he says he has to just not think about this right now, because the only reason he did it was because he told it was the only way to do it. It's something he's also not okay with. But in the meantime, though, that's one inheritor down, the rest of them left to go. And so from there, the Spider Army just fucking piles on to the inheritors, just going all in on them and not letting up for a second. They just go in, and sadly, we don't see the climax of this, but the implication is, yeah, the Spider Army just slaughters them. They are gone. Which, again, we don't see it go down, but the final shot of all the Spideys just converging on the remaining inheritors is still a kick-ass one. So, yeah, I will fault the fight scene for not showing us the coup de grace, but maybe not. Maybe it's for the best, considering that we went for the bloody thing. So either way, the comic then cuts ahead to later in the aftermath of the battle, as we see the Spider Army gathered around the cloning tanks, as we see Otto's plan in action. Also, a little fun fact: one of the Spider-Men is Stan Lee. I'm not even kidding. One of the Spider people is just Stan Lee in a Spider-Man costume. It's actually kind of nice. I like it. But either way, that's another thing. He's not really an important character, but I just think it's a nice tidbit. But either way, yeah, the spiders are looking on this, and some of them are still making their dissatisfaction apparent. But others also recognize that what they're doing here is probably a necessity. And sure enough, we soon see what that necessity is, as whatever's going on, the cloning vax is completed, and when they're opened up, out pop the inheritors. Only they're babies. Yeah, it turns out this was the compromise that Otto wanted to give. Because, you see, the inheritors were the way they were, not just because they had were the way they were, partially because of their upbringing. You see, thanks to Annie's status as the pattern maker, she's able to kind of figure some things out about the inheritors, specifically how their daddy was very much a monster, which we already knew. We saw enough of Solus in Spider-Verse to know the guy was a dickwad, and the guy is clearly a bastard in the highest sense of the word, because after all, he banished Karn to the far reaches of the multiverse and had Karn jumping from world to world, killing Spideys for centuries under the pretense that eventually he'd be able to earn his way back to Loom World, which, yeah, that never happened. Solus is just being an asshole, and he prides his children on being strong, showing power, doing what they want, just toying with the multiverse at will, and yeah, basically, part of the reason why the Spider Army is doing what they did was to remove the Solus element, because it turns out it wasn't just Solus's upbringing that made the inheritors what they were. Solus himself was a monster in the purest sense. He had that bloodlust already in him, and he wanted his children to have that bloodlust as well. And so when he bore those children, he infused within them the same bloodlust that he had, the same hunger, desire to feast on spider totems, and so from there, it's what raised them into what they became. Which is why we've had them be reset here. As it turns out, Otto did put their consciousness in these babies' bodies, but he removed their memories and took out the genetic component in them that made it so that they needed to feast on spider totems in order to survive. So now they can feast on regular food and other things that normal people eat. And so they're cured, and basically this is their chance at a second life, free from the influence of their psychotic father. Although there is one little problem. Nobody knows who's going to raise them. And even the assorted Spideys who are raising children are like, no, we already have kids and they're already a handful. We're not dealing with this shit. However, there is one spider person that volunteers to help them. Specifically, May Parker, a.k.a. the Spider-Man, who we did briefly see in Spider-Verse when Karn visited her universe with the intent of feasting on her before a team of Spideys went in and, well, not only stopped Karn, but also wound up recruiting him to their side. So, yeah, she's more than willing to volunteer, because she actually talks about how she and how she, her husband, and her Peter had been wanting to foster children for a while, and even she says she misses the pitter patter of little feet running around the home. So she happily volunteers to take in the inheritor babies, which the rest of the spiders are more than happy to let her do, especially since again it's Aunt May. They trust her. And as such, from there, the crisis is over. The multiverse is once again safe, though sadly the Great Web has not been restored. Though there is a means around that, because well, Gwen got the other spider people somehow, and yeah, she does have a means of jumping between parallel universes now. It's explained in her tie-ins, we'll get to that eventually, but point is, she is able to open portals to send all the remaining spider people home. Even Takuya gets his robot fixed, so he and Leopardin are able to go back to their universe, and in the meantime, Annie mentions that she can actually fix what's been broken, because it turns out, as the pattern maker, she has the means of restoring the web, and as long as there's life, there will always need to be a web. So she's ready to take on the job and reweave the web anew. Although the talk of the Great Web does kind of get to Mayday. It does kind of get to Mayday, because she mentions how the other spider people the other special totems weren't really involved in this one. I mean, obviously her brother is still the Scion, and Cindy is still the bride, but there was no other this time around either. So she kind of she wonders what exactly happened. But Annie confirms to Mayday there always will be an other. Just as the other spider totems exist, so will the other in some way, and the other will rise again. Potentially as someone Mayday knows. And it's here the comic briefly cuts back to the MC2 universe as we see a hand claw its way out of a grave. Specifically, the grave of that world's Peter Parker. And so from there, the remaining Spideys go home. Everything is safe and sound, and the only spiders left there are the spiders that call Earth 616 their home. As such, while Peter briefly volunteers to make a big heroic speech, everyone kind of shoots him down, and in the case of Miles, the Enigma Force leaves him. The crisis is averted after all, so he no longer needs the powers of Captain Universe, so he's back to normal as well, and so from there, the other Spideys just kind of go off on their own separate ways as well, with Peter and Miles actually giving Otto a kind of thumbs up, that ultimately, while they still kind of question his methods and don't completely agree with him, he's still okay in their book. He's still okay in their book, and if they ever need his help, he can call them. Which another little thing, as the other Spideys were going home, Otto did have a word with Insomniac Spidey, and did mention how he apologized for the deceit and what he used to get him. And while Insomniac Spidey acknowledges that he may not be the Otto that he wants him to be, he does show signs of being a good man, and he then does encourage him to keep going down that path. So I dig that. It's nice. But either way, yeah. Otto kind of sort of reluctantly accepts their congratulations, does say thanks, that if he needs the other spider people's help, he will call them, but hey, he's the superior Spider-Man. If any crises that come his way, he can deal with them. Whatever happens, he's more than ready to deal with any problems that cross his path. Unfortunately, though, Otto will soon be eating those words, as the comic ends with one final shot as we peek back in on Spider-Norman in his universe, holding up a canister containing his strand of the web of life and destiny. So, that's how Spider-Geddon ends. So, first, my thoughts on the finale, and then my thoughts on Spider-Geddon. Firstly, the finale is actually pretty good, I will admit it. I was honestly, when I first read, here's the thing, considering how my thoughts on the rest of the story, I thought this finale wouldn't exactly deliver for me, because, here's the thing, previous verse events have had kind of a botched finale, so to speak. That doesn't mean they've always been bad, but they've had had a sour taste in them in a bit. Like I mentioned, the ending to Spider-Verse really felt like it was just kind of everything rushed together. That things felt a little too easy for everybody, and it was just like a domino effect, that once the Spideys just started launching their attack, they just started doing a cakewalk over the Inheritors. And while there was some tension with trying to get to the Inheritors before they finalized their ritual, at the end of the day, it also really felt... it didn't really have the epicness that it really should have for... it really didn't feel like... The finale to Spider-Verse did not feel as epic as it should have been, especially considering how the subject matter of that story was bringing together all these different Spideys from across the multiverse. And likewise, while Venomverse I did enjoy, and I will admit that that ending was better than what we got in Spider-Verse, it also lacked in an epilogue, so to speak, as once the threat with the poisons was resolved, it was literally just all the Venoms went home and that was it. That was the finale. And likewise, if you want to count the follow-up to Venomverse, Venomized, that finale was just disappointing, as it felt like a Deus Ex Machina that just came right the hell out of nowhere with a similar lack of a wrap-up, with a similar lack of an epilogue. So it's kind of iffy on the finale. So when it comes to previous Spider-Verse themed events, finales are a bit iffy, so to speak. But I will give credit where it's due. This finale, I think it delivers. True, it has similar Deus Ex Machina stuff every here and there, but unlike the finale of Spider-Verse, this one really does feel like the tension is strong throughout the story, and not just and what makes it even better is that not only does the action feel really good as the spiders continually hammer in that they are just outnumbered by the Inheritors, and that while they will not stop fighting, they're probably not going to win this battle. And there's also some genuinely good emotional catharsis as well. As I mentioned, issue 5 began with the Insomniac Spider-Man going and confronting the superior Spider-Man, and finally just Insomniac Spidey finally learning the truth about the main universe Otto, that he wasn't his Otto personified. He wasn't the best version of Otto Octavius. In fact, he was probably even more of a monster than the Otto that he knew. So learning that fact, it made Insomniac Spider-Man probably angry. After all, he was betrayed by his world's Otto, and as we saw in Spider-Geddon number 0, he was iffy with the superior Spider-Man as well. So learning that he was a monster right from the get-go, it probably was just as jarring, if not even more so, because he thought, I'll give him a chance. Maybe he'll be the Otto I want him to be. And I see signs of a good man there. No. He is just as crazy, if not more so, than the guy that you fought as the final boss in your video game. So this guy is not someone you should trust. However, the difference lies in that he learns that Otto, despite what he's done in the past, is trying to do better, which even Insomniac Spidey admits in the story is not something that his Otto wanted to do. His Otto embraced the madness to the point where even when the neural interface was shut down, he was still pleading, believing that he was superior, that it was his duty as a better mind to lead the people beneath them, so to speak. And yet this Otto is genuinely apologetic, saying, look, I know I deceived you, but I had no choice. We are facing a crisis here, and yes, what I did was underhanded and was cruel, and I do not expect you to forgive me, but we need to stop these monsters, and if you don't trust me, that's fine. I understand completely, but at least let me try and make up for it right now, which I like. And I like that we see that kind of coming together with Otto. And throughout this finale, we kind of see Otto reaching that emotional breaking point as he realizes if he wants to win this war, then compromises need to be made. And I don't mean like moral compromises. No, as in just compromises between the spiders. Because after all, like he said as he was prepping the cloning vats for the baby Inheritors, he's mentioned how the Spider Army was faltering because they weren't united. The Spider Army was always going to disagree on how to take down the Inheritors. Like I said, once I wanted to trap them, once I wanted to kill them, it didn't matter that they were all fighting the same guys, they were always going to be split by that fundamental difference. So the best way for Otto to unite them, find a middle ground. And so that middle ground, yes, kill the Inheritors, but let them come back as babies. Allow them a second chance at life, for them to grow up into people that aren't these savage monstrosities that want to kill and maim literally all these spider people across the multiverse because of their ravenous hunger. It's honestly a genuinely good outcome in my opinion. I like it because yes, it is morally questionable because essentially it's erasing everything the Inheritors were. But by that same token, I think it's also one of those things that it's also kind of better than the alternative, because at least this way they do have a second chance. They can be raised into people who aren't these psychotic monstrosities. They can have a guiding hand, something warm and gentle rather than fierce and angry. Something that can actually lead them to a brighter tomorrow. Made even better by the fact that that a version of Aunt May is going to be raising them. Aunt May, one of the sweetest, kindest people in the Marvel universe. The one who's always wants to make you sweet, who's welcoming to everybody. This is who, and she's the one volunteering to raise them. It's honestly nice. I do like that. Again, there is still some morally questionable topics about it, but like I said, that's the whole point of it. It's a compromise. It's not exactly what either side wants, but it's still a way for the inheritors to find something new. There are moral arguments to be made on this option as well. As like I said, it is still erasing everything the inheritors were up to that point, and in a way that is kind of like death. But with that being said, that's part of the reason why I think it works as the middle ground. It doesn't satisfy everyone completely, but it at least gives the inheritors a chance to become something greater than what they were before, while also kind of potentially cutting off the path that would have led them to becoming, well, the inheritors. So I dig it. I dig it. It's a nice, it's a nice finale and a way to take down the inheritors. And on top of that, getting to that, the action is legitimately fucking good. Unlike with the finale of Spider-Verse, there is so much more tension here, especially since the Spider Army at this point is not as big as the one from the original Spider-Verse. And so even when we do get the backup of having an Enigma Force powered Miles Morales come in as a new cosmic Spider-Man, there's still tension, as even in the battle the Spideys admit the inheritors overpower them, and Miles has to duke it out with Solus, who, like I said, is just brushing off the Enigma Force. It's holding him back, but it's not doing anything to him. So Miles has to still find creative means of beating back Solus and using the Enigma Force in whatever way he can to gain some footing. And so little by little, we see the Spideys have to essentially take whatever they can get to take the inheritors down. Just grab at any footing they can to try and keep the battle going in their favor. And at some points, they do shift the battle in their favor. And like with Spider-Verse, it does come from similar out-of-nowhere areas. Like with Spider-Verse, I'll give another fault to Spider-Geddon. Like with Spider-Verse, the tie-ins really do feel out of left field. When Annie, May, Mayday, and Anya showed up and said, "Oh, Annie's the pattern maker. She can create us these super special armors out of Tatterus and the Web of Life and Destiny." I think that was kind of stupid. And it annoys me that something that big of a revelation was not a part of the story. And yet through the rest of the issue, Annie's all like, "I can see the skeins. I see what their lives are like. I can be this thing." Again, that should be a big part of the story, but yet it was relegated to the tie-ins. Same goes for Spider-Gwen. That really feels like a Deus Ex Machina. We don't know what happened to her after she disappeared. We know she survived the initial battle with the inheritors, but ultimately, we won't know what she was doing, and we'd have no idea why she's able to still freely jump between universes. Again, it's explained in her tie-ins. Otherwise, we don't really get any explanation for that. So, like with Spider-Verse, I'm going to consider that a problem. It feels like that should have been better explained in the main books rather than have it be relegated to the tie-ins. So, yeah, that's a thing. But even without that, the story still actually keeps it high octane. Especially since in the original Spider-Verse, those interventions were more like just pouring salt on the wound, because at that point the Spider Army was winning. Everything was kind of going in their favor when Peter started bringing in those reinforcements. And yet here, with every new reinforcement, it feels like a losing battle is slowly that the losing battle is suddenly becoming more and more hopeful. So I'll still give credit where it's due, and it's genuinely badass. I still like seeing them gaining more of a foothold as the inheritors are realizing, "Oh shit, we are losing this fight." And what makes and again, when Miles uses sword vigor to just destroy Solus, I think it's awesome. It's legitimately fucking awesome. Hold on one second. Sorry, Chinny was chewing on a bone and I didn't know it was a bone. Anyway, back to the story. Yeah, seeing Miles destroy Solus' sword vigor is fucking awesome. And yes, it does feel like it should have some more moral implications, but counter argument, he kills him with a giant fucking sword with giant cosmic hands. That is awesome. You cannot tell me that is not awesome. That's genuinely badass, so I'm still going to give it a thumbs up. Yes, it's morally reprehensible, but counter argument, I like giant swords. I really do. So, I like that. I do genuinely like that. And the fact that Otto is and kind of going back to the emotional side, the fact that Otto is putting in the effort to try and do something that the other spider people would at least be more willing to agree to, I like that. It's genuine character growth and fits into Otto as he tries to do the right thing. As from a moral and practical standpoint, he does realize that the spider army needs to be on the same level, need to be of one mind on this. If they want to take down the inheritors, then he needs to come up with a solution that can please everybody. And that means, having to make a compromise, which is why he does the whole turn the inheritors into babies thing. Again, I dig that. It feels like a genuinely strong finale, and we do at least get something akin to an epilogue here, because once the inheritors are beaten, we do have the spider armies just saying their goodbyes to everybody, each of them exchanging words, saying farewells, hinting at the future events and what's to come, like when they talk about how Gwen is the last... How they talk about that Gwen is now the only one that can travel the multiverse, so there's still something there. Or how when Annie mentions how there is always going to be an other, and then we learn that Mayday's dad is going to potentially come back, as we see his hand rise up from the grave, as it's hinted that he's the new other, which... honestly, I'm okay with. I liked reading the MC2 Spider-Girl books, so learning that that version of Peter is now revived, good. A+. You did good on that one, Spider-Geddon. You did good. And to make it even better, they do hint at some more interesting... There's some genuinely good emotional catharsis lying around. As Otto and Insomniac Spidey share a few words, and while it's clear Insomniac Spidey is not exactly happy with what Otto did, he is encouraging him to still try and be better, which I think works, because again, Insomniac Spidey is still an alternate version of Spider-Man, and considering his connection with his world's Otto, he at least wants one version of Otto in the multiverse to try and be better, which I dig. I like that. And on top of that, there is indeed a sequel hook. There is one last thing in the comic that definitely makes you realize that while the story is over, there is more to come. As the final shot like I said, the final panel of the comic showcased Spider-Norman as he was smiling evilly and holding up his strand of the web of life and destiny. And we know Spider-Norman has plans, and whatever they are, they're not going to be good. Especially when juxtaposed with Otto saying, "I'm the superior Spider-Man. I can take on any threat that comes our way," which... yeah, spoiler warning, we're gonna be looking and seeing what happens there later. But, on the whole though, the finale to Spider-Geddon, I do think is a genuinely good finale. It has a lot of epicness to it, it raises the stakes well, it feels like it has proper tension and motive and good emotional conflicts. And while there are still parts of the parts of it that do kind of have problems, like we don't see the climax of the battle as all the spiders just start piling on the inheritors, or how the tie-ins coming back in, I feel like should have been integrated better with the story. On the whole, I think the finale to Spider-Geddon is pretty damn good. So I dig that. With that said, though, what are my thoughts on Spider-Geddon as a whole? I think the story is just fine. Which I know it seems weird that I praise the ending of this comic to hell and back, and yet say the overall story is just fine, but here's the thing. While I do enjoy Spider-Geddon, and I think as a sequel, it's nice. I think it's a decent follow-up to what we saw in Spider-Verse. But I'm also gonna say that I think Spider-Verse was better. That does not detract from the quality of Spider-Geddon, but there are problems with Spider-Geddon that do genuinely annoy me. And for starters, Spider-Geddon kind of has pacing issues. Like with Spider-Verse, like I said when I talked about how the tie-ins were more integrated into the plot here, and how they weaved right in, and how they felt like they were kind of shoehorned in the finale, it's sadly a similar case in the rest of the story. Only, unlike with Spider-Verse, where there was still a flowing narrative while still showcasing the tie-ins were occurring during the main story, Spider-Geddon feels like it has holes in the story, which is not a good thing. It feels like the tie-ins were supposed to be an integral part of the main story, and yet when it comes to Spider-Geddon, jumping from one issue to the next, it feels like we missed some things in between. And before you say, well, that is what tie-ins are supposed to be, there are some things in there that we should know about. But, and yes, I agree, that is a problem. And yes, I agree, there are even some some of not because and Spider-Geddon is not the first event to do this. There are even some of my favorite events feel like they're missing plot points like that, like Blackest Night. I love Blackest Night, but the stuff with Hal Jordan gathering the other lanterns for the final battle should have been included in the main book, and yet that was instead relegated to the Green Lantern tie-ins. So that kind of stupid. But here it feels like, again, entire sections of the story are missing. And as a result, the story really does not feel like it has pacing. At least even in Blackest Night, there was still an ongoing plot going on in the foreground that we could still follow and keep track of. And as a result, while a part of the story did feel like it was missing, it also felt like we were still seeing a flowing narrative go through. And a similar case could be said for Spider-Verse. While the plot points from the tie-ins should have been integrated better into the main story, at the very least, in Spider-Verse, we still had a flowing narrative. We still had a chain of events that go in from cause to effect. And it went like this. We saw the Spider Army as they were forming, and we saw them gathering together and bolstering their forces. We saw Peter be made the leader which then led to Otto and his superior Spider Army being folded into their army. We saw Peter and Otto having to duke it out. We saw the Inheritors as they were prepping to go after the Spider Army. We saw Peter being strategic as he went to go gather more forces. Hold on one second. Sorry, Chindy wanted to be let outside. But like I said, there was at least a flowing narrative in Spider-Verse. And like I said, events did feel like they led from one event to the other. So it did at least feel like there was something going on. Yes, it felt like there were essential plot points that we were missing because the tie-ins were happening at the same time. So that I felt was genuinely annoying, but you could at least still read the original Spider-Verse storyline and get something akin to a full story. But then likewise, if you picked up Spider-Geddon and were only reading the main story, sadly, I don't think you're going to get that much out of it. And again, that doesn't mean you're not going to get anything out of it. There is still good stuff in the main book if you don't read the tie-ins. But with that being said, it really does feel like there are some plot points that are just left out. And considering how things jump ahead between issues, it really feels like that we are missing essential things that we should be seeing to understand the story. Like when Miles said he went to go recruit Peter, and then the next time we see him, he's recruiting more Spideys. And then likewise how we were told, oh, we sent away teams for this, even though we never really saw that in the main book. It's just something that we have to assume happened. Even in fucking Spider-Verse, they actually did showcase the lead-ins to the tie-ins. When it came to the lead-ins for the Spider-Woman, Spider-Man 2099, and the Scarlet Spiders tie-ins, they at least showcased those Spideys going off and doing those things. Likewise in Spider-Geddon, all the things that begin in those tie-ins all happen off panel. Moreland going off to duke it out with a 616 Peter because he has a beef. That happens in between issues. The Auto Spider team as they go to Earth 3145 to get the Solus Crystal happens off panel. The Spider Girls happens off panel. The only one that had a proper lead in my opinion, was the Spider-Gwen stuff. And even then, there was no checking back in with her. At least in Spider-Verse, we did check back in sporadically with the tie-ins to at least see what was going on in them. So we still at least got an idea of what was happening behind the scenes. It could have been integrated better, but at least there was something. Whereas likewise in Spider-Geddon, aside from briefly mentioning the tie-ins, they don't really factor into anything. Only really there to just showcase, oh, these things are happening, so yeah, go read those books. That's the full extent of them. Even the stuff with Spider-Gwen is just, she winds up in another universe, wonders how the hell she's gonna get back, and the next time we see her, she's arrived with a whole army of Spideys that she's gathered. So that is something, so that really just feels out of left field. And like I said, it feels worse in this miniseries when compared to the original Spider-Verse storyline, because again, it feels like there are whole chunks of the story missing because of it. So yes, I am going to consider that a problem. On top of that, there are some honest to God, and on top of that, there's the continuity issues. I mentioned, like, they range from more minor to more egregious ones, but they are apparent if you even read the original Spider-Verse storylines, or even read any other Spider-Man related stories. Like, for example, the stuff with Otto and being able to recreate the Inheritors' cloning vats, even though despite the fact that he had never borne witness to them in the original Spider-Verse. That's a problem. Ben Reilly saying, "Oh, I'm good now, despite the fact that I went crazy." That's a direct continuity flub between this book and his solo Scarlet Spider books. The whole Miles saying that he was there when when Cosmic Spider-Man was killed by Solus. No, he wasn't. He was off with Drake Bell Spider-Man gathering more recruits for the army. That was even the first time we saw the web slinger. So, yes, that's a problem. And the most egregious one of them all, how the Web of Life and Destiny works. That is a problem. It really feels like which I know I'm harping on this again way too much, but the Web of Life and Destiny was a big part of the Spider-Verse mythology. It wasn't just a means of jumping between universes, it was the literal foundation for the multiverse. And for them to just treat it, and for them saying the only consequence of destroying it is that multiversal travel is no longer possible save for these very special exclusive means, I think is a problem. So yeah, I do think that's a big thing, and it does hamper my enjoyment of the book. And on top of that, there are some genuinely dumb moments that kind of do get my goat. And one of those things is sadly the split in the Spider Army. While, like I said, while I did enjoy seeing the Spideys working together, I liked seeing them fight, just kind of finding common ground and sharing information despite their difference in ideals. I did genuinely like that. But the bigger problem there is, if they're going to be working together anyway, then why even have the split? It really feels like an unnecessary plot point that's just there to add unnecessary tension that honestly even that doesn't even exist. There's no tension comes from having the Spider Army split. It's just they're split. That's it. They end up working together anyway. They end up fighting side by side with one another. So, really, the whole thing there really just feels like an artificial plot point there to try and create character for Otto. Which, to be fair, that's good character development. I'll compliment Spider-Geddon for that. Otto's character development throughout the story, I think, works, as we see Otto genuinely taking steps to undo his mistake, taking responsibility where possible, actually trying to listen to other Spider people even if he disagrees with them, finding compromises, and ultimately even expressing regret that for some Spideys he disappointed them. Like in the case of Insomniac Spider-Man. Like he genuinely did not like that he disappointed someone who looked up to him. And then likewise, by the end of the story, despite the fact that he still advocates for killing the Inheritors, he also realizes, if I want everyone to work together, I need to find something that they all will agree on. Which I think is a lot better than what happened to him in Spider-Verse, where he just straight up killed the Master Weaver, and then when all the danger was past, he tried to do something exceedingly selfish by cutting the strands of the Web of Life and Destiny because he didn't want to die. But in this case, though, we see him actually being more selfless, being willing to listen, actually try and help out, be more friendly with the other spiders. And yes, while he's still kind of at odds with them, there's a little more common ground between them. And that's genuinely good. I like it. It's good character stuff for Otto as Spider-Man and for him trying to be a good person again. The problem lies in, though, that feels like that was the only reason that the split happened. It was there to create artificial tension between the armies to ultimately give Otto character development, to ultimately show him and Miles finding common ground, which I'll give another compliment to Spider-Geddon. It was actually cool seeing Miles in a leadership role. It actually worked out well, especially if you have seen Into the Spider-Verse prior to reading this comic. So I dig it. I like it. He actually worked as a leader. So good job on that. Sorry, lunch coming up. But my point is this. The story, my point is this. While I did like seeing the Spider Armies working together, and I do think the character development for Otto works, the whole split in the Spider Army plot point really feels like it was forced and ultimately does not contribute that much to the story beyond the sections that involve Otto. So yes, definitely considering that a problem. But with that being said, I still recommend Spider-Geddon. There is still enough in here to like. Once again, like with Spider-Verse, it is still cool to see the spider armies come together. While it does feel lacking in certain plot points, the story at least tries to make itself feel more epic by kind of cutting out a few integral parts from the original Spider-Verse, like taking out the Master Weaver, which, while I still say is short-sighted and dumb and kind of contributes to the whole continuity errors from the first story, at the very least, it does feel like that there's more of a handicap there, especially since the end of the story involved the Web of Life and Destiny being destroyed, which does have lasting implications. It doesn't have the implications that I think they should have had, but hey, it's still consequences. And hey, we like consequences when it comes to our superhero stories, right? So yes, that at least feels more, so at least there is still more rising tension, and we actually do see the battle continue to escalate as both sides keep trying to find ways to outmaneuver the other, as we see the Inheritors amassing more power as they try and get back to what they were, seeing the Spider Army try and get over itself as both sides try to come together to take the monsters down. We get some good legitimate character drama between some of the Spideys, some good heartwarming moments between a few of them, the stuff with Otto and Miles clashing over who's the best ideal. Even the stuff with Spider-Norman, I think, legitimately works. And the ending where you see he's still ready to do some more evil shit, legitimately nice. I'll dig it. And I dig it. And combine that all together with the finale, which honestly I think worked really damn well and definitely felt like a capstone for a lot of the emotional tension that was building up throughout the comic, I think, ultimately, Spider-Geddon is an enjoyable read. It's not perfect, and it's rife with problems. I am not going to deny that. I think that Spider-Geddon is very much filled with problems that do kind of hold it back, in my opinion, and do keep it kind of lesser than Spider-Verse in terms of quality. But ultimately, I don't think Spider-Geddon is a bad read. I think it's enjoyable in its own right. It just has some problems that if you're willing to look past, I think you will find a fairly entertaining story. Not a perfect one, and certainly not a great one, but still a genuinely entertaining story that I think if you give a chance, you'll find something in there to enjoy. So, there you go. Those are my thoughts on Spider-Geddon. I'm sorry if you end up disagreeing with me or if I've angered you with my opinions, but they're mine and those are my final thoughts. Like I said, this story is not bad, it just has some problems with it that do kind of get under my skin. So, that's really it. So, yeah. For those of you who stayed the full hour, thank you for that. But, yep, we are now done with the Spider-Geddon story. However, before we move on to follow-up material, we got quite a few tie-ins to look at, and we'll tune in as we end. I hope to see you again on Thursday as we look at the first of those tie-ins and see Spider-Geddon's answer to the initial Spider-Verse miniseries and the Venomverse War Stories one-shot. As well, we peek into the lives of a few of the other Spideys in the multiverse as we take a look at the Vault of Spiders tie-ins. So till then, I hope you have a good Tuesday, and as always, take care.